Alright, it's time for me to put on my smug face. Are you ready? Here you go. Smug face. I warned you about YouTube, bro. I told you, dog. So in a previous video, I warned you all about how YouTube was not necessarily the best means of discovering new games to play. One of the things that I briefly touched on is that the content in the video may not be an accurate representation of the game due to various corrupting influences. Although we didn't include any examples of this in the video, there have been numerous instances of this time and time again. Now, these pay-for-coverage deals, they're usually surrounded by some form of non-disclosure agreement. The most that you'll see is some form of disclosure on or around the video, if you're lucky. But lucky for us, some of these agreements and deals have leaked. So we can see the types of things that publishers are ordering YouTubers to say about their games in exchange for cash. A couple of years ago, some members of a YouTube network outed EA by leaking the details of some of EA's assignments for games such as Battlefield 4, Need for Speed Rivals, and FIFA 2014, among other titles. Among what the content producers were told to do was to touch on exactly the talking points that they were advertising at the time. For example, in the Battlefield assignment, you were supposed to focus on the Levolution system, which was heavily advertised in all forms of media. You even had a cute little link to the trailer to demonstrate the type of things that they wanted you to say. One thing that is pretty consistent between all of these offers that I've seen is encouragement to downplay the severity of bugs that are found in the game. And downplaying bugs is something that has gotten EA in trouble with its investors in the past, who thought that they were investing in a better product than what was actually released. Maybe that's the reason why publishers have a special name for YouTube Let's Players. They don't call these people Let's Players, they don't call them reviewers, they call them influencers.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Check out this other mailer that Machinima sent to its content creators. Basically, shilling out for the Xbox One and shilling out for Microsoft. Look at that, you'll get $3 extra for every 1,000 views you get. Not nearly as generous as EA's $10, but hey, this assignment is a lot simpler. In either case, that's pretty generous compared to YouTube's pretty crappy CPM. But what I wanted to point out was the intro. Hello, influencers. Yep, that's right. That's what they're called. The industry doesn't view them as a means by which to inform the consumer. The industry views these YouTubers as a means by which to influence the consumer. These aren't the only instances by any means. You can just punch YouTube gaming scandal into Google and you'll find no shortage of articles on them. But the reason that I'm talking about this today is because of a recent press release by the FTC. Here, let me read out the header. Warner Brothers settles FTC charges that it failed to adequately disclose that it paid online influencers, there's that word again, to post gameplay videos. And we're gonna see that word yet again. Influencers were paid thousands of dollars to promote Shadows of Mordor. Now, most of us have heard about this before. We heard about this all the way back in 2014. However, some new details have come to light, and so it's worth touching on again. One of them is the scale of this campaign. The sponsored videos, well, they reached more than 5.5 million viewers. For a little point of comparison, the article that Nathan Grayson wrote about the game jam that his waifu, Chelsea Van Valkenburg, alias Zoe Quinn, was in, that article, well, it reached less than 1% of that number of viewers. Warner Brothers paid each of these guys hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars. They gave them free advance copies of the game and told them exactly how to promote it. Straight from the FTC here, they're saying that they, quote, required the influencers to promote the game in a positive way and not to disclose any bugs or glitches that they found. So it's painfully obvious at this point that anyone who saw any of those Let's Plays, they were not getting a fair representation of the game whatsoever. They were basically getting a marketing spiel, an advertisement, as directed by Warner Brothers. This alone is pretty bad. I mean, they're blanketing the airwaves with advertisement instead of genuine Let's Plays. Even if they're disclosed, it makes it a lot harder for the consumer to actually become informed about the title. But about that disclosure. Warner Brothers specifically instructed the influencers to place their disclosures in the description box appearing below the video. They also mandated as part of the terms that other things would have to appear in the description as well, meaning that the disclosure itself would be below the fold. You would have to click that See More button in order to see the disclosure. This is nowhere close to what the FTC considers to be a clear and conspicuous disclosure as required by law. They say that the form of disclosure has to match the form of content. If you're making an audio recording, the disclosure needs to be in the audio itself. If you're making audio-visual material, it needs to be in both the audio and the video. Not only that, it has to stand out. You can't just blend it in with the rest of the content. And via electronic mediums, it has to be unavoidable by the consumer. In other words, putting a little tiny line of disclosure beneath the fold of your description, that's not doing the bare minimum. That's less than the bare minimum. According to the FTC, you might as well not be disclosing at all. You're not really informing the consumer. But what makes this go from a big deal to a huge fucking deal is one of the names that the FTC named. Yep, that's right, PewDiePie. Now, I'm already not a big fan of Mr. Felix. He was one of the creators at the YouTube Summit, and he was all too happy to see Google use its community guidelines for censorship. In this campaign, he was responsible for 3.7 million of those 5.5 million views. And as instructed by Warner Brothers, he put a teeny tiny disclosure beneath the fold of his description. There you go, look at that cute little disclosure. This video is sponsored by Warner Brother. Yes, Warner Brother. There's only one of them. So, of course, PewDiePie and the other YouTubers, they're in full damage control mode. PewDiePie made a video in which he concludes, if I did something wrong, I should be paying the consequences. In this case, I don't think I did anything wrong. Yeah, that's right. He's a good boy. He didn't do nothing. He goes to FTC school every day. He was turning his channel around. And then comes the big bad FTC and guns down Big Brother Warner Brothers. Didn't do nothing to deserve that. Now, here's the thing. Warner Brothers didn't throw a giant block of concrete through PewDiePie's window, break into his house, and hold a gun against his head and force him to sign this contract. PewDiePie read the small print. He knew full well what he was getting himself into. He followed the conditions that Warner Brothers put forth to a T. And yes, Warner Brothers conditions shat all over the consumer. You can't say that you have no responsibility because an offer you accepted, an offer which gave you money, obligated a breach of law. I don't care how many of your friends he compliments, he needs to own up to his mistakes. Yes, he said he'd do better in the future, and the nice, clean guidelines didn't exist when this video was made, but those guidelines are just that, they're guidelines. The law that the guidelines was meant to clarify is still the same as it's always been. I also have to give a huge dishonorable mention to The Verge and other sites like it. They're muddying the waters with their shitty reporting, and quite frankly, it makes the job of people like me a lot harder. I can't just inform the consumer, I have to work to undo the misinformation that's been fielded by these crappy blogs. I mean, look at this headline. PewDiePie himself read it in his video. Quote, PewDiePie and other YouTubers took money from Warner Brothers for positive game reviews. Now, the obvious mistake here is that they said reviews when there was no review. It was a Let's Play, which, to be fair, is in an entirely different category. PewDiePie then goes on to say, so basically, all these news articles are using me as clickbait, putting my name to shame when I didn't even do anything wrong. Here's the thing. Yes, you're right, PewDiePie. Those articles are shit. I can just read the FTC press release and see where they made all these mistakes. But you know why everyone's using PewDiePie's name? Do you know why he's in all those headlines? It wasn't these articles that randomly decided to pick him out. The FTC itself was who decided to highlight his name out of all of the YouTubers. And I can't say that I blame them. He was responsible for more than half the views after all. And if they're gonna make an example, they have to use a name that is recognizable, one that people will instantly recognize when they see it. But I don't want to spend too much of this video just picking on PewDiePie. Yes, he made a mistake. Yes, he needs to own his mistakes. But what I really want people to come away from this with is a realization that each one of these instances is bad, but it's a sign of an endemic problem within the industry. And no amount of disclosure is going to fix that. One of the things that helped bring about the death of print and also blogged games journalism is that the whole thing ended up transforming into a racket. Basically, these reviewers, these journalists, these whatever you want to call them, ooh, I know, how about influencers? These influencers, they ended up beholden to the industry that they're covering. They were dependent on these publishers for their review copies and their advanced copies, and they had to do exactly what they said in order to keep getting them, even if these things weren't in the consumer interest, like post-release embargoes. We've already seen publishers take that access away, and while that may have happened to publications that were deserving, now every other publication out there has that sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. What we're seeing is the YouTube scene slowly transition to similar circumstances, only worse. These CPM deals that the publishers are offering, they're really good. They can more than quadruple the amount of money that you're making off of a video. But what is going to happen if you step too far out of line? What's going to happen if you stop acting like a good little industry shill? Do you think you're going to keep getting these awesome offers if you do that? And there you go. The power structure has been inverted again. The people who are supposed to be holding the industry accountable are now being held to account by the industry itself. And that is all kinds of fucked up. And no amount of disclosure is going to fix that. Is this what you, the consumer, really want? Do you want to be shat on by these publishers and by these YouTubers, but have the consolation that they told you in advance that you're going to be shat on? And as these promos get more and more ubiquitous, it's going to be harder and harder to find accurate coverage of the game. Let's play footage that accurately resembles what the game is actually like. And the worst thing is, these are advertisements. You're going to YouTube and you're sitting through ads to wait to see yet another advertisement. You can't even use the excuse that the advertisement is there to pay for some form of content. It isn't. The advertisement is the content. But that's not even the worst of it. Let's do a little hypothetical here. Let's say you were one of the participants in EA's Battlefield 4 launch assignment. Let's look at the conditions of this. It looks like you can make up to 3 videos on the topic that are participating in this. You get about $10 for every 1,000 views, and this deal caps out at around 20 million views. Now you're a really good YouTuber. You're able to cap that out. You're able to get those 20 million views no problem. And that means a big fat $200,000 check is headed your way courtesy of EA Games. And what do you know? EA may have more promos like this in the future. Wouldn't want to get on their bad side, so they stop sending you these great offers. So here is the question I have for you. Not you, the hypothetical YouTuber. You, the viewer. You, the consumer. You, the gamer. Even if those paid Let's Plays are plastered with disclosure, they're just covered in it. Do you really think the other content on someone's channel, the non-sponsored content, their reviews and their Let's Plays, do you really think that's going to be fair? Do you really think that that's going to be unbiased if some big publisher is regularly cutting them checks for thousands upon thousands of dollars? Just something for you to think on. I can only speak for myself. And in my opinion, that's not the kind of future I want to see for this industry.